Hi, Marek. I'm
Hi, Tom.
I'm delighted to welcome you in our offices. We've known each other for quite a long time now. I'm very happy to have this chat together.
Yeah, same here. We were talking about it. It's been 8 years, did we say?
Yeah,
To 7 years. It's incredible. And seeing your office, it's like, yeah, it's also pretty amazing. So super happy to be here.
thanks. Maybe we could start with the way we met. I remember it was in 2017. I was like finishing my studies, and I wanted to work in tech. I was like about like to join like Uber or Snapchat, and then a friend told me, "Oh, there's this lady. She also studied at LBS, and you should go chat with her." And I sent you an email. I actually applied for a student ambassador job. So like I was about to hand out like promo codes and like go see clubs in UK universities, and you answered, "Oh, actually, like we have an opening for country lead for France for Circle. Like, you should look into that." And so yeah, that's
Yeah,
how we
that's a
met.
pretty incredible story. I remember that. And I was so proud to have someone also who had been at London Business School. Because, I think when you go through school like that, so having alumni is something that when you make that step of hiring, alumni, you feel like it's actually quite an achievement. And I remember also like having you fresh out of school in the team, but all the questions you were asking, it was relentless. Do you remember our one-on-one? So we were in this building and we used to go around and walk and we could do laps and laps and laps. And you had like endless questions on everything, which I thought was absolutely incredible. So yeah, very fun memories of that time.
Yeah, I remember when I interviewed with you, it was just like an hour straight of like just asking questions left and right.
Yep,
Yeah, which hasn't ended since.
indeed.
So maybe you've done like a lot of things and you have lots of initiatives at Hella now. Like maybe you could run us quickly through like what you've done in the past, what you are focusing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, super short background. Like you, I'm French. I actually finished my studies in China, and my first job was for LVMH. I worked in Shanghai, then in Hong Kong. That experience made me realize that I didn't understand anything about business. So that's when I went back to business school. And after business school, I worked at BCG, worked then in the travel industry for Expedia. And I was headhunted in 2015 to work for Circle, which is then, shortly after that we met. So I worked for Circle for 4 years as managing director for Europe and then as chief marketing officer. Left in 2019 and then became CEO of a neobank. So very different, aspect, but still within fintech. And after that, worked 2 years for Near Foundation. So Near is one of the layer one, which I'm sure is served by Kiln. I think actually we did that partnership. And since then, I've been, moving more to portfolio. So now I'm advising different companies. I'm on the board of companies. And yeah, I'm taking more like a broader portfolio view of the world.
Great. I'd love to know like what made you want to work in tech in the first place. Like, when you were at BCG, I'm sure that there were like plenty of exit options, and you chose to join Expedia. Why did you make that call back?
That's a great question, actually. I think I hadn't fully realized when I was at BCG the power it was to actually have studied telecom because that's my background. That's what I studied. So I think I hadn't fully realized that, the tech world was completely exploding. And I was approached by, folks from like LinkedIn and Facebook and different teams. And my husband was actually an entrepreneur in tech. And I was seeing what he was doing. And I was like, this is actually really interesting. I could mix my background of like actually business and tech and start working in industry. So that's, how my interest started. And then actually, while it's applying on the LBS job board, I found this job for Expedia. And I thought, oh, I love travel, so I'll just go and meet the people. And turns out people were incredible, super culture. I completely fell in love with it. And so it's more about, I'm not a person who ever had a big plan. So it's not how I work. So, I didn't have a plan to go into tech.
That went pretty well.
Worked out pretty well.
You just spoke about like the people and the culture at Expedia, and that's a topic that we spend like countless hours discussing, like how to build great teams and culture. And I want to join the team that you built in Europe for Circle. That was very inspiring and something that I really try to replicate while building Kill. And I'm curious to understand like what did you like about the people and the vibe at Expedia?
Yeah, I think a few things. There's one part which I remember very vividly. I went to the interview, and when you go to an interview, you're a bit stressed, like you don't really know what you're going. But immediately, people made me feel at ease, right? So I could be who I was, and I could actually come up with my ideas. But specifically within the interview, I was asked a question of like, have you been on our website, and what would you change? What have you thought? And what actually, what is one change you would make? And I had been on the website, I had tried, and there was something I was struggling with. So I said it. And the next interview, actually, people came back and told me, hey, the stuff you said before, that was a great idea. We've been testing it. And actually, it turns out we can, we've improved conversion rate by whatever. And I was like, oh my God, this is great, right? If they already like start, thinking that way. But it was also really, this sentiment of like, you feel at ease, you can be who you are, you can come up with also ideas and you'll listen to, and then you're going to be able to really contribute. It was really a gut feel. But I remember also going out of that interview and calling my husband and telling him, oh my God, I so want to work there. Like, this is basically my dream place. And yeah, it was more a feeling than anything real.
That thing that you said about like having tried the product is such a great advice for people applying to job. If anyone wants to apply at Kiln, like I strongly recommend that you try out the website and our products. I remember like we saw that a lot at Circle, people just showing up to the interview and not having tried what was like a free app to download on an iPhone. I mean, it was very simple. It's kind of like the base level of like showing up.
I totally agree. And I think even if it's a B2B business, I think, when you're a candidate, I mean, you have a duty to show interest. So try, poke, understand, listen, look at stuff, and like, try to understand what people are saying, how the product is. Yeah, but same as you, I'm sure it's probably the same thing. Like the number of time where people haven't tried a product, or when you go to an interview and you say, I've tried a product, people are like, oh, great. You have? Yeah.
Yeah, the bar is on the floor.
Exactly. And I thought, this is not clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think also from a candidate perspective makes a great point, because this is a product you're going to work with and you're going to have actually to market. So like you'd better understand it and love it.
Yeah, it's not just a matter of getting the job. It's like
correct. More than that.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so like one question that we like always discuss is like, how do we build great teams that have a great working dynamic? So like that point that you mentioned, that you want someone who's passionate and actually has tried the product and has demonstrated interest, is super important. Like maybe you want to expand on that, or like other key elements of building a great team that you believe strongly in.
Yeah, and you're right. That's pretty one of the topic we spend a lot of time on when we talk. But so I think, yeah, definitely trying the product, having a passion and wanting to be here, right? I think it is very important, because this is going to take like a very huge chunk of your life. The other thing I look for in people, or when I think of like building teams, is actually team play. I play basketball, that. But my whole like thinking around actually team is very much built on like basketball as a sport. And I think you don't win because you have like, great individuals who are able to put 3 points, but you win because the team is, working as a team, and people respect each other and they hear each other and they're complementary and they have different skills, but they can all work like a perfect like machine, right? And so I think that element, which is something, it's subtle, but sometimes, for example, in interview, you'll hear people tell you, me. On my book,
It's a red flag.
on my books, that's a red flag. But I think equally, you need to like, detect what are the things that make, people who will be great team players. It's also about, are you actually passing the ball? Are you okay when you need to defend and not always wanting to shoot the 3 point? And I think that's actually probably one of the most fundamental thing. If you have team players who are there for the team and they love the product, then you have every chance to win. And because here's my other thought, even if, and there's funny like, Hollywood movie on that, but you can win by even not having like, or having a team that looks maybe like, not like all the super top players, but actually together they're incredible. And so I think that's actually how you can create, great companies, is also having like that team spirit.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we're going to give away awful lot of interview secrets, but that point,
That's
like,
good. Maybe
people have done the work of like watching a video in a one say. Yeah, like someone's like solely focused on saying, oh, like this is why I want the job, is like this is going to happen in my career. Well, like actually, when you see someone who says, oh, I want to do that for the company, I believe in this change in the market, which I think needs to happen. Like it's so refreshing, because you feel like you can connect on a different playland with people. So yeah, super fulfilling. Do you think that this can be taught, or it's just that something that is innate with people? I guess that maybe depends on where they are in the career as well.
Exactly. I was going to say that. I was actually going to say, I think it depends also of stage of life, right? Because like when you start, even like, remember at LBS, for example, like sometimes as students, we have a tendency to be very self-centered on like, my career, I want a job, right? And actually, and they teach us that. They say, like, stop being like that. Like, you have to actually think, what do you give to other? So I think it's two things. I think it's actually, yes, it can be taught. And actually, if you also see the benefit of what it does, then actually you will, it's something that you will do more and more. But the other thing is also, like, probably it's more, it comes up also as you grow up, I was going to say, but like, it comes up as you mature, right? But definitely, it's always, I mean, when people ask me for interview, I give the tips of, like, go on the product, try it, try to understand the strategy, as you were saying, like the market where they're in. And when you show yourself, it's not about you. It's actually it's for the company. Like, you're going to be part of this. So how do you contribute to something that is actually bigger than just you, right? It's not just about you. So it's always the same. It's always the same tips, which I think can be, rehearsed and definitely taught.
And back on your point of finding people who are passionate, like what are the specific questions or behaviors that you look for when you want to find someone who's passionate?
Well, very often I start with open question. I'd be curious to hear actually how you do it. But very often I ask open questions such as, so why are you interested in the role? And I think there's a few things, right? People will tell you about the company. I've seen candidates who just blew my mind off by, like, well, because I think what you're doing is so important for this, that, and currently you're doing this. And then you're like, they can do the pitch better than you can, right? So you're like, oh, wow. And then when you ask them, and what about the role? Like, why is it that you want to do that role within that company? And people are able to articulate how they see it. Then you're like, whoa, they thought that through. They're definitely passionate about it. And I think there's also another thing, which is like, body language, right? You'll have people who are, coming at it more like you can see and hear in the verbatim that they want to do it, and others who might not be, right? And might be, verbatim that they will use is more like they want a job, right? And so I think that also comes with experience. I pretty interviewed thousands of people. But I think, those things, start open questions are always a very good thing, and letting people talk. So it's a very good tip for seeing where they're at. So what's your tip?
Yeah, first, like, silence is amazing. Like, let silence do the work. Like, usually when I ask a question and there's like 15 seconds of silence, it has been a great one. 2 minutes of silence, like you've asked something embarrassing. Like, yeah, I mean, look, I'm very simple and just ask, well, besides what you mentioned, like why Kiln, like the role, I ask, what are you passionate about? What's the last thing that you learned?
Yes.
And then I look for depth.
Depth.
Rather than having a laundry list of interests, I would like just let them pick one thing
And then go
and
first. Yeah.
go really deep. And then I'm really open. Like if someone like talks to me about like jazz music or history or Formula One, like I'm happy because I feel like passion is just like quality that you have. It's very easy to take from one domain to another.
Yeah.
And another great question. So this is not specifically about passion, but it's like one of these questions which really makes people stop and think is, what's the best thing that you learned from a manager or someone that you worked with in the team? And like that, so that's more back to your team play point. It really makes me see whether they can be able to take a step back and be respectful and mindful of the people around them and be aware of their behavior and improve as a result.
Yeah.
That's usually with these like 2 questions.
Yeah, exactly. A few questions give you a lot, actually.
Yeah. And then the last one, I mean, like, I'm giving away everything. Yeah.
Good.
But the last one is like, what's the hardest thing that you've done?
Yeah.
Like seeing what you define as being like the threshold for something being hard.
Yeah.
Is really, really cool. And then you can also see when someone thinks in terms of impact.
Yeah.
Because something can be very hard, but be kind of meaningless in the grand scheme of things. So this combination of questions, like usually, like within like 15 minutes, gets you there. There's a fantastic one that I actually learned from the CTO at Ledger. It goes like, you have 2 minutes to talk about anything that you want. You're free to choose the topic. The only constraint is that you have to stop speaking at the 2-minute mark. And it's a fantastic question because then it shows you whether someone can deal with uncertainty, can self-direct, and can choose like the right amount of details, but also like still meet that constraint. So, actually, how many stop talking? And also you have to say something that's meaningful, right? I mean, if you choose to talk about football for 2 minutes, I mean, that could be interesting, but why?
Yeah.
Like, can you make it compelling and relevant to the conversation? So yeah, these are like
very good.
my thought having questions.
Yeah, one other thing actually, which I also do, which is maybe it's more so like for exec level, but it's also asking the candidate questions. And I think in particular for leaders, you get a lot by seeing how the interview is driving the conversation.
Yeah.
And the best candidates will come with very thoughtful, pointed questions that cover strategy, that cover culture, that cover tough moment, that cover all of that. And so that's also another thing that I've learned to do, which is like flip it basically. And you're more in a mode which is like, what are your questions? And let that drive, which is also, I think, gives you an insight on how people think. And even again, through the verbatim, right? What are the type? You have like people who will ask questions around the company and people who ask questions on like what is in it for them. That already gives you like quite a lot, right? So that's also a good way, I find.
And something else that we look for at the like overall like hiring process level is whether someone's understanding of the company has evolved over time. If the conversations went by, like hopefully it
Build on it. Or
Yeah.
react to
as you said like earlier, it's the candidate like trying to decide whether this is a good company to join where you can do your life work. You want to be forming a better complete picture of the time.
Correct.
And so you definitely want to see that, which hopefully by the final interviews.
Yeah. And as a candidate, I think as a candidate, there's also a good tip, which is to ask the same question several times. Because in particular, one question as a candidate, which I think is very important, is culture. You will always get different answers of like, yeah, our culture is like blah, blah, blah. But actually, if you ask different people what it is for them, what it means, then you can build also a real picture of what it is, which means that the better picture you have of the culture you're about to join, the more you can also understand if this is really like in sync with you, right? Because I actually believe that you succeed in a place if you're in sync first and foremost with the culture, because it enables you to be who you are without having to think about who you are, and therefore you can do your best job, right? So I think that's also another tip for candidate, which is like keep asking your questions several times to different people.
Yeah, definitely. And so once you've hired the right people, you kind of have your ingredients like to make them a nice meal. Like how do you make them work together? Like what do you do once you have the people in the room?
And I mean, you've experienced that because I think that's also how I was managing it at Circle. But I really believe in actually communication, transparency. And, it's not because you're leading a team that you necessarily have all the answers. And I think also being genuine about that creates trust, right? So how do you actually have a group of people who, again, are all different, do different tasks, but understand each other? Are they all going the same direction? Do they have the same alignment? And therefore, are they all like committed to go with you on the same journey? And that in my experience goes a lot with a lot of communication, right? And so I in the jobs I've held, I always spent a lot of time thinking through communication, because very often you have conflict in teams. It's just about communication. It's because the marketing person might think that the finance person is saying something. They're all saying the same thing, but they actually don't speak the same language. So that's actually the role as team leads that we have to make, the team really work and be together. Yeah, I don't know. How do you think about it?
I mean, definitely like one of our values at Kiln is trust and transparency. Yeah, I believe that if we hire great people and we give them the right context and autonomy, like good things should happen. I think a lot of cultures like a few defining stories that like it's kind of like crossing the Rubicon, but like less dramatic. But like that there are moments in which you need to make the right decision and be very transparent and involve people in it like the right way without any kind of objectification. But when a moment matters, people will keep talking about it, and that will become a cornerstone of your culture. You just need to get them right, and then it compounds. It compounds like either way. So you really need to be right. But yeah, like storytelling matters much more than I thought it would. Like creating like a vision, like where you want the company to go, so people can see like where they fit into this, and like to build their own building blocks to that.
Yeah.
And then hopefully you have to show that then progress, right? You cannot just have a story and tell it and remain still. But yeah, and I've become like really passionate about like storytelling, just like writing things about like Pixar, about like great novels and like great tragedy, because I believe that it's like just the way we organize all the information that we've experienced and we learned about. If you make a great story about it, it's easier to remember.
Yes,
easier
it's
to share.
memorable. Totally.
Yeah.
But I think also building on what you were saying, I think culture also built as like cornerstone moments. But sometimes when you when you see something is wrong within a culture, for example, let's say someone is actually not a fit with the culture and they could be a super performer. In my experience, actually, it is actually very important to cut that, because things like that will actually destroy very fast your culture. And you could say you're all about like trust and transparency, but you have someone who's not behaving in that way and you keep talking about it and you keep giving the stories, and then people are not fooled by words. They see actions and they're like, well, actually, if behaving like that is okay, why would I, right? So I think it's also very important to equally having the storytelling, being able to portray so that you can, embark people with you on the journey. But when you see things that are at odds with that, no matter what the returns and the results are of it, to be able to actually cut and say, well, this is not, where we're going.
Yeah, and it becomes like a defining moment as well.
Correct.
Like,
Correct.
in a way, but yeah, we have seen that in the past, and yeah, we can definitely feel like you can feel like when you feel like. So I also like to think about like company like an organism, like a body, like you have like limbs connected together, and you really have some functions which are the muscle, like product and engineering and go to market, and then you have like more connective tissue, like everything that's operational, like legal, finance. HR is never going to build value in itself. Like if you only had these three teams, you wouldn't have much, but that they're necessary to hold everything together. Um, and then like kind of like a body, it really reacts strongly when something foreign like tries to enter, and like I mean, we could feel like our team and our culture like generally like fighting back against like new ways of doing things that we weren't aligned at all. And so like as a co-founder, as the member of the leadership team, like either you're going to let that happen, then like bad thing will happen to your culture, or you have to actively defend your company against that.
Yeah. And I think also, and you pretty have lived it, right? It's also like there's different stages. So when you are saying an organism, I think there's also like different growth stage. And you guys have been through like, being a small team to then being a larger team, and then and that changes all the time, right? Because there's actually like the culture evolves, that the actually links between people evolve, and you can pretty remember everybody's name up to like, let's say 80, 100, and then after that it becomes more complicated, and then so all of that also plays a role within it. But I think, I've had actually an amazing coach, which I think we have the same coach, but anyway, who talks a lot about, direction, alignment, commitments. And I think that stays true no matter what the size of the team, and helps you go actually through a culture or through culture changes, which is as long as people are going in the same direction, which you can storytell because you can show, which you can iterate all the time. And it might feel as a leader that you feel you're constantly saying the same thing over and over, but repetition is actually what gets through. But actually, having that direction, then you can actually align people, then you have the commitment, right? And so you can go through those moments, which are a bit like, challenging as you're scaling up super fast.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to ask you about coaching in a way. How do you feel about the importance of knowing yourself to be a great leader? And to which extent did coaching help you with that?
So coaching, back to basketball, huge fan. I think actually all of us need, an external voice, or like someone to also, because sometimes you get in your own head, you see only your silo thing, you think you're perfect, you're not. Someone needs to tell you. So, not that I think, that far from it, but so I think the role of a coach, generally speaking, I think is very important to grow at every level of the company, but even more as you become a leader, because what happens very often is, as you lead teams, actually, for some reason, things tend to be told to you a little bit differently. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's going on. And then there's, the real things are not said anymore as they should be. And I think being able to recognize that, being able to also have, again, teams that function, being able to understand your own limits, like, where are you really good at, where are you not so good at, and therefore where should you pay more attention? What impact do you have on people when you say certain things, do certain things? Sometimes, it took me time. I thought I was doing things with all the best intention, actually got completely wrong the other way. I have no idea, right? So I think that's in that sense that having a coach, at least to me, has been extremely helpful throughout my career. And in particular, when we are in environments that, move really fast, are quite stressful, are very challenging, it feels sometimes we don't have the time to take time about ourselves because we have so many people to look after and we have this but the best you can do is if you become yourself better, then you can take care actually of others better, right? So huge fan of it and cannot recommend it highly enough. Yeah. What's your views on it?
It's super helpful. Like, you have to know yourself.
Yeah.
Because like your emotions and your thinking style will impact people anyway. So you might as well like reflect on it and then maybe try to change it. If you want. I mean, I know that I need to get my beauty sleep. I need to meditate. I need to go exercise. Otherwise, like I'll start like being maybe stressed about the state of things. Like, and especially like operating crypto business is not exactly a relaxing activity.
Yeah.
And so I've been through that. Like, I've seen that if I put like my work ahead of everything else, like it's going to take a toll on me, and it's going to take a toll on my teams or people surrounding me generally. I think that's like tremendously impactful. So yeah, I think you have to, but you just have to go through that. Like, you have to make that mistake of like
Exactly.
throwing out. Like, otherwise,
Yeah.
it feels like the like experiences that you have that are attached with emotions, that they will stick much more than anything.
That anyone telling you about it.
Yeah.
Completely.
You just have to go.
Yeah. But you know, another thing also that I don't know if you've done that, if you guys do that here, but that I'm actually a big fan of. It's a humbling moment. But doing a 360, and same when you're like, CEO, whatever, like you might think you're doing great because company is doing great, like direction is great. But actually having, feedback, unfiltered but anonymized from others on really like what you're doing really well and what you should improve on. I think those things are really important to be able to face and to also want to improve. And back to, you were also talking about growing, learning. I think it's part of the journey, right? All of us constantly have things that we need to work on. And there's no better example for a team than a leader who's actually also working on him or herself. There is no better example for a leader who's able to be balanced as a person and not, snapping at people because he or she hasn't slept enough and is actually completely out of whack, right? So it's also like lead by example, and that takes work on yourself. And that work, you need a coach or you need someone to help you do it, unless you're like able to do all that. I'm not, but you need, a structure to also, as an athlete, would need to be able to get better.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like everything we do at Kiln, you are familiar with. So like 360 reviews, regular one-to-ones.
KPIs, okay.
Exactly. If you know the bills, this is where I got them from.
It's exact. That's part of our prestations.
And like, what do you think like are the best things that you learned about yourself as you went on that journey of becoming an executive and coaching? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's my values, because, and again, it's probably something that also comes with like as you go through life and as things happen in your personal life, in your work life. I think actually it is, who are you, right? Which is a lifelong question, which we talk also a lot about. But like, who are you truly? What are your values? What do you stand for? And therefore, gets reflected in a lots of different places. And I'm actually a very big fan of the more aligned you are with that, the better. And the more aligned you are with that, and if you find your place, then the more impactful you can be. But that takes time. It takes also like true hard honesty, because sometimes we want to be what others would want us to be. And so I think it takes like a hard look at yourself to say, are you doing that for yourself? Are you doing that for others? And so I think, those moments of like going through that, and do you believe in this or that? And therefore, how do you, so yeah, I think that's been which again is an ongoing exercise. I think I'll do that until I'm dead. Uh,
Sweet. I'd love like to change gears for a bit, and we're both French, really passionate about France and Europe, and we have strong views about the tech ecosystem and more generally like the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Europe. I've seen like recently you got involved in Product Europe, so would love to hear more about your involvement there and like generally what you think about the space here. Like, what are the strengths? What are the things that we definitely need to see change and improve?
Yeah, well, look, I think in the world we live in, more than ever, it is actually very important also, back to values, to think about what we stand for. And yes, you mentioned that I'm French like you. I feel very deeply European. My husband is Spanish. I've been raised in like many European countries, and I've actually had the opportunity to work across the continent and across the globe. So I think, that is things that I carry deeply. And I think, this this construct is quite unique of having different languages that are able to function together and have a unique market. I think is actually something that it's huge for the world we're in. Project Europe is actually a little bit in that ethos. We are a group of 150 plus founders and entrepreneurs and C-level people who worked in some of the largest startups and scale-ups across Europe. And we've basically come together and have created a fund, which is to actually help the next generation of founders, of European founders, and also as they go through their journey, help for them to have actually people who have that experience. I think, as Europeans, especially as French Europeans, sometimes we tend to be very pessimistic, and I think we're our worst enemy because everything is a little bit, it's not that good, but I think we have a lot of reasons actually for being, one, very proud of what Europe is and what Europe can be, and to be very optimistic about what we can build. Every time I come in France, I'm so taken away by actually the depths of talent, which you and I have talked a lot about. But we had incredible schools, we had incredible thoughtful people who are actually can be very technical. Look at in crypto, in AI, in defense, in some of the fields that are the most complex. We pretty have some of the top talent that might be in France, might be actually all over the world, right? But so the depths of talent, I'm very impressed by. I think we can definitely do better so that the ecosystem feels more like an ecosystem across Europe, because too many things are actually very broken, country by country. Today, if you want to invest in, say, a German company or an Austrian company as an angel investor or as a fund, good luck with the amount of paperwork that you need to sign. If you want to do that in the UK, it's actually very simple. The UK has this SEIS, EISS, they also have mechanisms so that people can invest easily. So that's not something that's actually, same level playing field. For entrepreneurs, tax is very important, and not just the level of tax, but can they give options to their teams? Are their teams going to be taxed before even they have actually exercised those options, or are they going to have a fair treatment of it? Can they wait because there might be an exit, there might not be an exit? Same, this is so very, very, very different by country. There's no harmonization. And so if I had a pledge, and I hope with Project Europe we'll also be able to actually share some of that, is that it is so not unified that it's actually very difficult for us. And equally, on the regulation side of things, which sometimes Europe gets criticized for a lot, I think some of it very unfairly, but we have a unique market. So look at things like GDPR, it's a unique market. MiCA, unique market. The US is now starting to have a regulation for stablecoin. Good luck, it's state by state. So, good luck for going through it and figuring out which agency you need to work with. In Europe, we had that on certain end. We just don't have it for unifying a startup ecosystem, which is still very, very local on so many different levels.
Yeah, I really wish we had a unified stock option scheme in Europe. This would make life, and obviously also a unified company registration scheme.
Exactly.
Both.
A way to raise funds. Yeah.
That would be wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, that's I have a long wish list. What would be on your wish list? If you had the magic wand and you could change anything about the tech ecosystem in Europe, what would you?
I think it would be this unification of conditions, right? I take again the example of if you want to invest in a company that is in Austria, it's going to be so paperwork intensive. Why is it not the same? The same process. Every startup has to raise, every startup has to issue shares and options, and the treatment of it is it's totally different. If you are a French company, you employ someone who's in Italy, they're going to have a different. So that my magic one would be, let's look at a startup from zero to exit and this journey, and what are the things that we can actually make in common so that we have something that's easier to navigate, and therefore will be able to make bigger players.
Yeah. A point that I find very attractive about Europe versus the US is the retention and the amount to which talent will stick with the company. Usually when you join a company in France and Europe, you have a plan to stay there for 3, 4, 5 years. So we really had the time to take someone in, onboard them onto our culture, the industry, the products, and then great things will happen, right? Because they have a long-term outlook. and they have enough knowledge to make an impact, and they can like start shipping stuff and see the results of them and iterate. Well, like in the US, there's maybe like less commitment to companies, which is fair because it really goes both ways. So I think and as you said, like the depth of talent in France and Europe, Jerry, is amazing. So we have like great arguments for like keeping build.
No, I agree. And I think, building on your talent thing, I think also like we have, I would call it a sustainable mindset in a way that we think, okay, how do we make this business, which is actually going to, attract, retain, which is going to become profitable. And sometimes it's to a detriment, right? Because we think immediately like, okay, this needs to be viable, right? Like this needs to become something. We're less good storytellers, which, you could argue is actually, it's a better thing, but storytelling can be like hype and boom, right? Like it can also crash things. So I also think in the world we live in today, that's very important. And, nurturing talent takes time for someone to get their feet under and be properly, embedded and then carrying that knowledge of the company and, helping the company grow. It's very valuable.
Yeah, definitely. Something else that I wanted to discuss with you was being a board member and board management. It's an area on which like few people have a view. Generally, when you are an employee at a startup, you'll be a bit familiar with fundraising. Obviously, like you might maybe have some blog posts from VC. Maybe that's how you found a given company in the first place. Or if you're trying to gauge like the value of company that you're considering, like you might have a look at the investors that got involved. But very few people think about boards. Never crosses their mind. Even as a founder, like when you start your company, you like don't even have a board. You don't really know what it's there for. And so now you've made the switch to this being a larger portion of your time. You board member, non-executive director at IG Group. I'd love to have your take on first, like what a board is for, great board dynamics, and how you came to do that switch from being an exec yourself to sitting on boards now.
Yeah, look, I think so. Well, there's a lot of things there. So let's start with maybe being a board member on a publicly listed company is actually very different to being a board member in a startup or a scale up. On a publicly listed company, there's actually, it's very regulated. There is duties, and a board is there for governance. It is also there to ensure that, the company is doing, things as it should be doing, and that it's, growing. And it's a duty to shareholders, right? Shareholder value. On publicly listed company, there is a lot of structure around it, and there is a lot of like committees which you have to have for very good reasons. Or you have to have a risk committee and an audit committee and a nomination committee and so on and so forth. On publicly listed company, what I've actually come to learn and absolutely love and enjoy, it's a team sports, and it's a very different actually exercise to being an exec, because when you're an exec, you're in charge and you need to actually, take actions and do things. And when you're on a board, it's actually more an observer asking questions, but you're part of a team. You're one voice as a team. There is no there is one voice, which is the board. I'm learning a lot from being, on an incredible board with people who are like, very, very actually experienced. And I'm also seeing through this, team sports and how you have actually different voices, very different experiences come together to make sure that the company can be the best it can. On a startup and a scale up, I think it's very interesting what you say, because you're right. It's very few companies realize the importance of a board. But I think if you have a good board as a startup, a scale up, it's a magic power. It's your 6 men on the bench, right? Like this is really the part that will completely, push you through. And so, for example, I'm also on the board of a startup which is in natural hydrogen, very different. But the founder has very quickly understood the power of having like a board that will hold him accountable, but also like be hands-on with him and help him where he doesn't have the skill set. And so in a startup, you don't build it because of governance, but you build it of, okay, what are the skill sets that I need my 6 and 7 and 8 power that I want to have on my board with me? And a little bit the same with a scale up, right? So in startup scale up, I think it can be a superpower. Equally, boards that are not effective or efficient could actually be very bad for a company, right? So I think it's, again, very important to think about that. But so far, my biggest learning is that it's a different sport. And so I'm learning a new sport. in which you need to learn new skills, and therefore you need also to learn like what's your role within that. And it's also a totally different game in which, if in an exec career the end job is the CEO, in a board career the end job is a chair, right? And it's a totally different career, right? So it's the journey I'm on right now. I have to say, absolutely love it. It's a lot of all the strategic challenges, with none of the operational hurdles, which sometimes, one might miss. But most of the time so far, I think it's actually really incredible.
And so what do you do to like to try to improve and learn about the job? Because like, so what I found is like, as we scale, like there is like increasingly a lack of resources. Just because like when you're at a super early stage and you're looking for product market fit, there are like tons of books, tons of videos, ton of blog posts, and then like once you cross like, well, a given number in AR or like valuation, or there's just like less resources available. And it's even worse for like board related matters, right? Because like the addressable market of the people who might be interested in the content is extremely small. How do you go about it? Do you chat with other people who do this kind of job?
Yes.
I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, it's network. I think it's actually, learning from others, learning from your peers. So one, I observe a lot, like the people I have around me who are doing that. I talk a lot, we share a lot. It's actually, you might think it's a small community, it's actually a very big one. Again, it's like, it's like, right now you guys are playing basketball, now I'm playing football. Different world. But in the football, there's like a lot of people, right? And yes, there is less books on what it means to be a good board member, but actually there is a very strong network, and you can actually learn from that. There's also courses. So far, I haven't done any of it, but it's there's also some hard skills, like what is an audit committee, what is a risk committee, like how do you actually. There's some technical things you need to learn, but network. And I think it's pretty the same when you are in a scale up, as you say, when there's less books that you can read. But you have peers, right? You have peers who've gone through similar things and with whom you can actually share what's working for them, what's not. And that becomes almost like your most valuable, your cheerleaders around you that can say, yes, I'm going super into that. So, or different things. So yeah, my answer would be just network your peers and not being afraid of actually asking questions. I'm going through that. Is how would you handle that? So
Speaking of courses and building a network, I'd love to have your thoughts on like how you think about giving back to communities you've been part of. So I know that you've been a speaker at the London Business School Blockchain Club. I know that you gave lectures on pricing, actually, LBS, back when you were at Expedia. And so yeah, how do you think about like giving back to like the communities, the schools, the people that helped you in the past?
yeah, well, I think I tend to always say yes if someone asks for help. And so I coach, mentor, whatever you want to call it, in particular women a lot. And entrepreneurs, I get, a lot of ask. And my default is always like, let's see if I can be of help, right? Actually, London Business School was funny. I remember when they started the blockchain association, I think nobody really believed in what they were doing. And I was like, yeah, just do it, which helped them. And I had no idea. So sometimes it's also just being a support, like, or just saying you can do it. And to me, giving time or ideas or sharing that is actually very valuable. I also think, giving money where it can be helpful, again, in things that are aligned with your values can be very impactful. But yeah, time is probably the thing that I do most.
Sweet. Now like switching on like super like funny topic, I'd love to talk about like the macro context and the geopolitical context. And so for people who will watch this in the future, currently, Trump is playing around with tariff, which is bringing a lot of uncertainty in the world. How do you think about that? And its impact on crypto and its impact on the startups that you are seeing as part of like Project Europe, or like the startups that you have been advising or have invested in?
Yeah, well, look, I think we're living a very interesting time, and probably a time that will be remembered in history as a turning point of something new. I don't know where we're going, but definitely feels like the world order is changing. There's an acceleration of technologies, whether it's actually blockchain, AI. There's a lot of things that are coming together. So it's not just tariffs. Like there's a lot of things that are coming together that will create a different, very different world from what we know. Um, and within that context, I was looking at, for example, the impact of tariffs. There's pretty a trigger within, reorganizing the world. If you look at markets, they look more like something we've seen in crypto, which is like, highs and lows and very low. And the problem with some of that, and even the way it might be handled, is that the people who are impacted in that are actually very often like, retail and small businesses and people who've put all their earnings and savings in it. And even if things then go back, it doesn't go back the same way for them, right? So in all that context, I think the best we can do, I go back often to that. It's like our values, like, individually, like, but what do we think of? What's the world we want to live in? What's the world we want our kids to live in the future? And therefore, that's where I think something like Project Europe, to me at least, it's very important, because I think we can have that voice. We can do great things, and we can, come together. I think it's a time also where humanism to me has never been so important that it is today. Like, I think as humans, we're great, right? When we can actually come together rather than actually being divided and put once against the other. But yeah, definitely it's a time to, I try every day to mark down the big things that are happening, because yeah, in 10 years, 15 years, we'll look back at that time and say, that's when it changed. That's when it's pretty dense. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you make of it?
It's funny. I was in office on Capitol Hill in DC when Trump was on TV with that board. That was funny to live for these times. This is where the meditation habit comes in super handy. Just feel like stuff is flowing on me. I think it helps to have like a long-term vision for the company, to have plans that are measured in years, not in months, and to have confidence in what you're building. And like also like knowing that you built a team with a strong core that also shares that belief. And back to the points that you made about transparency and communication, like we have to show up. Like it's not the time to hide under the table. Be it in front of your team, but also in front of your investors, in front of your customers, to show that you are actually like still focusing what matters, which is like you want to keep hiring and training great people, and you want to keep building and releasing great products and like maintain great relationships with the customers and like other third parties. And I think like if you have that unwavering belief in what you're building, like things should be fine as long as you've thought about your financials before and you are in a good place. And yeah, like having that kind of like personal space where you can draw energy and come from is really, really important.
I think it is a very good lesson, because it's very easy to get like, carried away in a spiral of like stuff happening all the time. And then like you feel you're in a washing machine, you don't even know anymore, right? So I agree. I think like long-term focus, thinking about also what matters. I heard something recently, which I'm actually using a lot, which is what will not change. Because everything is changing. It feels like everything is changing around, but certain things are not going to change. And so I think also like having that view of what is not changing, having like confidence in your values, what you do, what you stand for, belief in that, and also reaching out to others. Like, something I recently realized is that this is it. I mean, we're living a hard time. If we think it's hard for everybody. We think it's hard for us. And sometimes I'm like, maybe I'm overreacting. No, everybody's freaking out, right? So like reaching out to others, also talking about it, because it feels sometimes we've been like, we can't talk anymore. No, we should talk. We should like be able to also not judge the person that we have in front of us, because if someone has different ideas, it's okay. But it's actually by talking that we can also understand each other better. So yeah, but I really like your long-term focus point. It's very important.
Yeah, and also the beauty of being a crypto founder is like we got training in that in the past.
True.
And like every like year and a half, 2 years, like you got like that new like market downturn. So all the time I can feel that my stress and pain threshold like got really, really high. So that takes really something very serious to get this stressed. So it's just like a journey of building a company.
Yeah.
You learn to like put your emotions in the box and like open the box, so it's helpful, but most of the time just like leave
Build resilience. I think we're lucky to be in that position, but imagine if you don't have that, right? That's what I was thinking through this week. I was like, to me, it looks like crypto. So I'm like, okay, fine. This will go away also at some point else. But for a lot of people, you've never experienced that. And, so I think, yeah, this is a good thing. So which begs the question, how do we help others also be more resilient and focused and strong? And, it's okay.
Yeah.
We'll go through it.
What are the specific like pieces of advice that you give founders that you're working with?
So specific advice I give to founders within this context, actually being focused on the business, what matters. I think it's very important. Taking care of yourself, extremely important. And, again, like mental, physical health, all of that I think is is quite fundamental. And talking, right? Having external advice, whether it's a coach, whether it's a mentor, whether it's someone, I think you cannot carry the world on your shoulders. And as founders, it's very hard because you have your business, you have your investors, you have your teams, you have your partner, you have your life, like everything is on you, right? So I think actually like taking perspective and having that space, very important, and very happy to be a punching ball for that. Because it's true, when you're in a place where you can, I can now be in that place where I don't have the stress that probably you have, right? So it's also important to say like, it's okay, I can be here for things like that. And I can help you see through sometimes what looks like not very clear.
I have a few questions before we wrap up. And so I'm actually going to take a page from my interviewing playbook. It's like, what's the best thing that you learned from someone that you worked with?
I think the best thing I learned from someone I worked with is it's from Jeremy Eller, whom we both worked for. And I remember when I was thinking about joining Circle, I was freaking out because I was like, at Expedia, I had this great role, I had just been promoted, I was totally freaking out. And so I think I said no to Jeremy probably 2 or 3 times. Through the process, I was like, thank you very much, Jeremy, but actually I'm not going to join. And he never gave up. He was like, okay, yeah, fine, but blah, blah, and he kept going. I was like, oh, the enthusiasm and the optimism of that guy is just, it's so carrying me. And it was like, so I learned that optimism from him. I learned also like his unwavering, passion for his mission. Talk about someone who's been like, steady focus on that mission. And yes, the pastors is being like, but it's incredible. That's what I learned from him. And I think he's probably been one of the manager that has most influenced my career, my thinking, like on so many different levels.
Yes.
Yeah. What about you?
He's extremely inspiring.
He's extremely inspiring. Yeah.
Well, I think it's from you, like the importance of building a great team. And if you have like the right people, the right processes in place, like good things will happen, but it actually like requires work. It's kind of like nurturing a garden. Like you have to find the plants, you have to find the right spots, you have to water them. And then like all the time you have a beautiful garden, but it takes time. And then you can't just like do that and then like live for 3 years. You need to take care of it. But then it's going to like go beyond what you could have done by yourself. It's going to like take a life on its own, like you're building a like whole ecosystem. So yeah, like really it's super corny, but it's all about people in the end.
It is all about and take care of your plants.
Yeah. Thankfully that's not on me to do.
Teamwork.
Come back in more temple, see what else. And if there's like one lesson that you would like take away from like your life and professional experiences that you would want to share with the audience, what would it be?
Wow, that's a very big one. Only one?
It could be more.
No, I think if it's only one, it's like, back in the days when I was studying, I had this mindset of I'm gonna study, then I'm gonna get a job, and that's it. I'm done studying, right? But actually, work and life and career, everything is a constant learning experience, and I think never stop learning is my biggest takeaway. Like every day, learn every day is probably my biggest takeaway, and I think that will actually get you very, very far. What about you?
Mine is like it's like definitely stolen from Steve Jobs, but the world is extremely malleable. You can shape things around you the way you want, and once you've discovered that, there's no going back. People, things will adapt around you if you exert enough force and pressure on it. And it's like definitely like life changing to understand that.
And maybe I still didn't ask them.
You can say I'm gonna try and say it next time. Thanks a lot for that great conversation. Where can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about Project Europe, if they want to get your advice, maybe talk about an angel investment or advisory? How can people?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, easiest is to find me on LinkedIn. That's the tool I'm most on. And thank you so much. I know we've been talking about doing that for quite some time, but it's been incredible. As always, your questions are so thoughtful and really, really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for coming. We haven't even scratched the surface, so you'll have to come back.
Anytime.
Thanks a lot, Marieke.
Thank you, Tom.